He was just telling me that further north of here in Whitianga, there is a road crew put on standby there to monitor the situation there. And at the moment, they're not going anywhere. They are stuck where they are. All across the peninsula, we have had reports coming in of several schools closed or school buses just not taking to the roads this morning. And everywhere you do drive around here, you really do get those echoes of the last big rain event. You can still see where lots of slips happened and where the scars are still in the hillside, and that's just a reminder of what could still happen this time round.
What is the forecast for the rest of the day?
We look at the rain radar. It does have the system switching off from any time about now, and just 20 minutes, half an hour ago, for the first time in a long time, we could actually turn the window wipers off and it had stopped raining, and just now all of a sudden it had started raining again. So that's why we're on the move as I talk to you, walking back to our vehicle at a safe point with the roading crew that we're with, just because they don't want us too close to where that road has flooded overnight.
What's the official advice for the district at the moment? Is it the usual, don't be going near floodwaters, don't be out there unless you need to be? What kind of official advice to people?
Yeah, it's quite similar advice to what you're seeing in Northland. Just be careful on the roads. Ideally, don't drive if you don't have to. Definitely don't go through any floodwaters. The road crew was just telling me that someone did try to get through earlier when the road first started flooding here, and the water was quite high up on her body. So it really just shows how quickly things can change. I'm just staring back to where they have blocked the road to traffic, and you can start to see cars parking up now, somebody with their boat on a trailer. They won't be getting anywhere through this road at this stage.
All right, Kim, thank you very much for the cross. That is Kim Baker-Wilson, who's on Interstate Highway 25 in Coromandel. The weather is impacting that part of the country now, having delivered so much rain overnight to Auckland and Northland. And just a reminder, other parts of the country also remain under warnings. Top of the South Island also under wind and rain watches and warnings. But currently heavy rain still falling. You could hear it there in Kim's Cross, in Coromandel and in Bay of Plenty. RNZ's live blog is updating all the time with details in your area, rnz.co.nz. It's on the homepage there. 27 minutes past 9 with the latest also. Evie Ashton, good morning.
Good morning. Several key highways remain closed around Northland as repairs and damage assessments get underway, while others have reopened as flooding recedes. Human rights groups and officials estimate that more than 5,000 people have been killed in the Middle East since the conflict began last month. And US President Donald Trump says talks to end the war are continuing despite repeated denials from the Iranian regime. And the Warehouse has reported an improved first half net profit despite tough trading conditions. Those are the headlines on RNZ National. Our next full bulletin is at 10.
Diesel is crucial to our economy and your back pocket. What happens when it stops being cheaper than petrol? Is it fair to spend most of your life in Australia but then come home to New Zealand to claim the pension? And why are there hurdles for pensioners getting money out of KiwiSaver? Break down those money barriers by listening to No Stupid Questions with Susan Edmonds on rnz.co.nz/podcasts, your favourite podcast app, or Mondays at 7:30pm on RNZ National.
28 minutes past 9, you're listening to 9 to Noon with Catherine Ryan on RNZ National. We'll catch up with our Asia correspondent a little bit later. Some incredibly talented face painters and makeup artists are standing by shortly. They're going to be part of the fun that happens at Cuba Duper in the capital this weekend. And more arts a little bit later on, actually, around 10:30. We're going to hear about what's happening at the Mount Albert War Memorial Hall and Reserve this weekend, where the Illuminate Market is happening, bringing together market stalls and food trucks, creative workshops, free live performances. And this has been organised by Moxie, which is part of the charitable trust Recreate NZ, helping people with disabilities gain work experience and skills. So some good things happening around the Mutu this weekend, just hoping that weather has cleared, certainly, in Tamaki Makaurau. Right now, though, moves to locally conduct genomic testing are being welcomed for patients awaiting treatment. But there are concerns about what it means for insurance premiums and eligibility, and its renewed calls for a law change to prevent insurers using such information. Earlier this month, the government launched a 2-year pilot program which will see tests analysed at Christchurch's Canterbury Health Laboratories rather than being sent overseas. The move is expected to cut wait times for those with cancer and rare diseases. While it is good news for diagnosis and testing, concerns have been raised about what wider genomic testing will mean for health insurance, and these are not new concerns. Andrew Schelling is a professor at Auckland University's Department of Obstetrics, Gynaecology and Reproductive Sciences and is the co-director of the Centre for Cancer Research. Morena, Andrew, thanks for your time.
Morena, Catherine, lovely to talk to you.
So what is the genomic testing that we're talking about?
Well, this is just routine genomic testing that a lot of the rest of the world have been doing for a long time. We do this in New Zealand. However, of late, it's been most of the DNA testing has been done overseas. Finland, for example, has been doing a lot of the genomic testing. Although we're playing them in soccer tonight, we'd rather not be sending our DNA right across the world.
It's a long way to go, isn't it?
It's a long way to go. And having it done locally would improve our turnaround time, and we've got issues around data sovereignty and increasing capability in New Zealand related to this technology.
So what does the pilot involve? Has there need to be more resources for this? What's made it possible?
It's been relationships with companies like Illumina and use of funding. There's similar projects going on around the country, like in Auckland as well, but this particular pilot is a great step forward to bring New Zealand up to standards of genomics that we normally see in similar countries.
Is it being used also for treatment or mainly for diagnosis or perhaps for warning of a genomic predisposition? What exactly is it being used for?
All of the above. Genomics is really central to a lot of diagnostics, but also precision medicine, targeting of future treatment. So we really need this technology to be in place in New Zealand. It is present in other countries that are similar to us, and while we do it okay, this should be really mainstream.
Is the range of diseases it's being done for widening here?
Undoubtedly. We know.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, being the Associate Minister of Sport is the toughest job in government, obviously, but I've got a few other hats, and I'm here today as Minister of Transport. So thanks, Brett, for the introduction. Can I also acknowledge Desley Simpson, who I understand opened your conference? Oh, Desley, you are still here. And hello.
And you are here,
finally. Okay. Nice to see you, your Deputy Worship. It's great to be here. I can also acknowledge Nadine and Brett, obviously. I'd also like to acknowledge the AA District Councillors and staff who are here. Thank you for the work you do to serve your members and be an advocate for the things that matter to New Zealand motorists. I thought what I'd talk about today is transport funding, the transition to road user charges, road safety, our road toll, oral fluid testing for drugs, and a few other things as well. But I think it's worth starting by acknowledging the current fuel supply shock and the challenges that places on our transport system and all New Zealanders actually as a result of the conflict in the Middle East. We know that it's causing deep concern around the country and indeed across the world. We have sufficient stocks in New Zealand, and we're working hard across diplomatic, commercial and industry channels to ensure that remains the case. But it's a reminder of something we already knew. New Zealand is exposed to international fuel markets in a way that carries real risk. Around half our fuel comes from South Korea and nearly a third from Singapore. And when global supply chains are disrupted as they are now, the exposure becomes very tangible for families and businesses who feel the pain at the pump. We're already seeing significant shifts in behaviour across the country, and as a government we are closely monitoring those changes so we can respond if needed. Using data from a sample of vehicles across the country, we are starting to get a rough idea of how people are responding to the conflict. So if you compare the 2 weeks pre-conflict in mid-February against 7-day rolling averages for the subsequent weeks, we've seen a reduction of approximately 20% in vehicle kilometres travelled by cars around New Zealand. This is not necessarily surprising when petrol prices are up about 30%. Also not surprising is that people are responding in a predictable way. They're using public transport more. So boardings are up by more than 10% in Auckland and Wellington. MOT has been or will be publishing updated data regularly on these metrics starting later today. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested in the data. Last week saw more than 1,000 electric vehicles registered, close to double the week prior. Makes it the biggest week in EV registration since the end of 2023. Year-to-date registrations are nearly 2,000 higher than this time last year. And it's not surprising that there's a bit of a run on electric vehicles because people are looking at the fuel price and the diesel price and saying, well, maybe now's the time to make a switch to a cleaner car, an electric car. And I suspect that will continue. We're not going to be bringing back EV subsidies. The old clean car discount made people who couldn't make the transition to EVs, tradies and farmers and people in rural areas and lower income folk who didn't have the ability to do that, pay more for their vehicles to give money to people who can make the transition to electric vehicles. It was a regressive wealth transfer policy, and so we will not be bringing back the clean car discount. It also meant that taxpayers had to pay for that transition, and I do not think it is a prudent use of taxpayer money at a time when things are very tight and likely to get tighter. It is not a prudent use of taxpayer money to subsidise higher income earners to buy Teslas. That is not a good use of public money, and we will not be doing it. If you want to buy an EV, go and buy one. I've got two. I first bought my first EV in 2018, and I didn't take the subsidy, and I didn't need one. So if you want to go and buy an EV, you should, and I encourage people to do so. They're great cars, but I don't understand why a lot of people think the taxpayer or other taxpayers or other road users should help subsidise that transition. I think people are working it out for themselves. They're looking at the petrol price and the diesel price, and they're looking at the price of electricity, and they're saying, okay, well, maybe now's the time to make the switch, and I think you'll see that continue. Where government does have a role for us is around the infrastructure to support that transition. So you would have seen on Monday we announced over 2,500 new EV chargers will roll out around the country. We're partnering with ChargeNet and Meridian. On that, we ran a competitive tender process through the National Infrastructure Funding and Financing Company. It's essentially a form of co-investment. We're offering concessionary loans, zero interest loans, which will be repaid over 13 years. And it just, I mean, that rollout is happening commercially anyway, but it just helps accelerate that transition. And it's a much more commercially sophisticated way of doing it than just simple grants, which was what we used to do before. So the guys who did the ultra-fast broadband rollout, very similar kind of model, a sort of concessionary finance model. The guys who did that for the government back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, they're doing the same thing for the EV chargers. It's about 1,800 in the country right now. We'll roll out another 2,500 over the next 3 to 4 years, and there's the potential to do more, and we have the ability to respond and put more money into that initiative if indeed that is needed. But I think, you know, it's a good thing, and we're also making installing an EV charger a permitted activity under the RMA, so you don't need council consent to go and do it. It baffles me that ChargeNet and Meridian, and there's other companies do it too actually, spend quite a lot of time and money arguing with councils about the installation of what is actually just a pretty simple device at the end of the day. You shouldn't need a resource consent for that, so we're changing the rules around that. That will come into effect in the next couple of weeks. Heavy vehicles are also down around 5% over the last few days, despite an increase of 70% in diesel prices. I think, again, that's expected. Those who rely on heavy vehicles for freight or commercial use have far less ability to respond to these sort of price shocks with immediate alternatives. And you'll have seen earlier this week we announced targeted support for those most in need. We have lifted the in-work tax credit. So from 7th of April, 143,000 working families with kids will get an extra $50 a week through a boost to the in-work tax credit. That passed Parliament yesterday, will be signed by the Governor-General today or tomorrow and comes into effect on the 7th of April. It is temporary, so it's for 1 year or until the price of 91 octane petrol drops below $3 a litre for 4 consecutive weeks. It's designed to deliver support to working families who are under significant pressure without driving inflation up further or further driving up government debt. It's a $373 million initiative. We're funding it completely out of the Budget 26 operating allowance, and so it will not have an impact on inflation or debt. The COVID-19 inquiry stressed that spending in response to crises should be timely, targeted and temporary. And that's also what Treasury says, by the way, and all of the international advice that the government gets. That's what the government is doing. We're acting responsibly to try and cushion the most affected through this difficult period, but we can't do blanket fuel subsidies because that would risk putting pressure on inflation and putting pressure on our debt position. Throwing the kitchen sink at every event that happens is a recipe for fiscal disaster. So I understand the calls for broad, across-the-board fuel tax cuts. Every dollar, as you all know, every dollar from petrol tax and road user charges goes into the National Land Transport Fund, which funds our transport system. Across-the-board fuel tax cuts are also extremely expensive and they're untargeted. So we've taken an approach based on advice and based on best practice of focusing support on those who need it most. The reality is maintaining fuel supply is the most important thing we can do to protect Kiwis from the worst case scenarios, and there's a lot of work underway around that. Later today, in fact, 12:30, 1 o'clock, Nicola Willis, who's in charge of our response as a government, will be updating the National Fuel Plan, along with how we see some of those steps playing out in practice, and I encourage you to tune into that. Now, we all hope things improve quickly, but as the Prime Minister has said, hope is not a plan. So we are doing the hard yards now to ensure we have a solid plan in place to get us through whatever the international situation throws at us in the coming months. Let me talk about our transport funding challenge. We have significant transport funding challenges, and I'm determined to be upfront with the public about this. Our transport system is meant to be user pays. So in other words, road users pay petrol tax, road user charges, money goes in and it goes out the other end on maintenance, upgrades, new projects. But in recent years, Crown funding has been tipped in more and more, which comes from general taxation, so that's all taxpayers. So 2018 to 2021, the National Land Transport Program outlined expenditure of $17 billion over 3 years, and that was largely funded by road users who paid $13 billion. If you go forward to the 2024 to 2027 period, which is what we're in now, total investments nearly doubled at $32.9 billion, but road users are still contributing roughly the same amount, $14.3 billion. That delta has come primarily from Crown funding, about $12.8 billion of direct Crown funding over the 2024 to 2027 period. And it's really important that people understand this. Capital contributions like that from general taxation have to compete with other important priorities the government has to fund. Every dollar we put into transports, dollar we can't put into health or education or defence, where we have significant commitments for obvious reasons, or any of the other calls on capital that the Crown has. In all of these areas, health and education have significant infrastructure deficits and similar funding challenges. So it's a real problem. It's a real problem. Then you add in all the calls for extra transport investment. We've got resilience challenges on our state highway network. Recent weather events on the East Coast have shone a spotlight on that. We have significant deferred maintenance and renewal work required on the Wellington and Auckland Metro Rail network. We need a second harbour crossing here in Auckland. City Rail Link will open later in the year, and eventually, and I'm sure Desley will agree with me on this, the conversation will turn to what the next big public transport project is in Auckland after CRL. We have a pipeline of roads of national significance around the country, important growth-enhancing projects. So how do we make all of this add up? Well, one option is to lift petrol tax and road user charges. Petrol tax hasn't risen since 2020, hasn't kept up with inflation. In 2023, we campaigned on not raising petrol tax in our first term. That was a difficult decision, but I think the right thing to do when there was a cost of living crisis. Inflation was at 7%. But we have to be honest about the consequences of that. It has deferred the issue until later. Now, not a lot of people know this, but petrol tax is due to go up by 12 cents per litre on the 1st of January next year, by another 6 cents on the 1st of January 28, and 4 cents in each year after that. Now, I have to be honest with you, the idea that we would raise fuel tax during a fuel crisis doesn't seem like a starter to me. So we're thinking hard about these funding challenges. They are real and they do exist. And I'll have more to say about it soon. Later this year, we're going to publish a draft government policy statement for transport funding from 2027 onwards, which lays out how we intend to confront some of these challenges. We're also intending to publish what we've called a major transport projects pipeline, which is about building a credible long-term pipeline of transport projects with a variety of funding options and in a logical sequence, so that as funding becomes available, the sector and the public know what's next on the list and we can plan and prepare for it. And we're doing quite a bit of thinking about that. We've always said the Roads of National Significance program is a long-term phased commitment to upgrading roads around New Zealand. But they can't all be built all at once. The construction sector can't build 17 roads all at the same time, and nor would we expect them to. So it is about a long-term, credible transport pipeline, and we'll have more to say about that. We are pushing forward with reforms to increase the number of funding tools we have in the toolkit to deliver transport projects. So last year I introduced the Land Transport Revenue Amendment Bill to Parliament, makes the move towards a fairer, simpler and more modern system. So it introduces a more modern, flexible tolling framework, enables simpler, technology-enabled ways to pay road user charges so everyone pays for their fair share of the roads. At the heart of the reforms is fairness. Every road user should contribute in proportion to their use of the network. Our road user charges system is outdated. It was designed in the 1970s and it still relies on manual paperwork and licences, paper licences. Those of you who pay RUC, you know that you have to track your odometer readings, stick paper labels in your windscreen. Mine arrived the other day. And so the bill opens the door for new payment models like subscriptions or post-payment, allows private companies to offer easy, set and forget billing options, similar to how many of us pay for our power these days, or streaming services, or any of the other household appliances or household products that we purchase. The changes to modernise the system will also help us prepare for abolishing fuel excise duty and transition everyone over to RUC. And that is the government's vision, is abolishing petrol tax and moving towards road user charges for all vehicles based on, so people will pay for the roads based on distance, how much they drive, and based on weight, which is essentially about damage to the roads. It will be the biggest change to transport funding in 50 years, and it is a mammoth transition, and it's something that we have to get right. And the bill that's before Parliament sets up the initial framework, and there's a lot of work still to be done, obviously. But it's simply true that as our vehicle fleet changes and we have more hybrids and more EVs on the roads, the way we fund our roads has to change as well. It's not fair to have Kiwis who drive less and who can't afford a fuel-efficient car paying more than people who can afford one and who drive more often. So the government's plan will eventually see all vehicles pay based on actual road use, including weight, regardless of fuel type. On tolling, we're giving ourselves the flexibility to deliver big projects sooner. So tolling is an important mechanism to bring forward investment, and the bill brings forward some changes in that regard. So enabling corridor tolling will allow tolling on parts of an existing road where users clearly benefit from a new project in the same corridor. The bill gives us new tools to manage diversion from toll roads, including restricting heavy vehicles from unsuitable alternative routes, like they do in many countries overseas, and allowing toll revenue to help maintain those alternative routes when councils can't. We're also introducing annual CPI adjustments to make tolling fairer and more predictable, as well as shifting liability from the driver to the registered person to improve collection efficiency. We also passed legislation last year to give local authorities the tools to tackle congestion. Sitting in traffic wastes time, costs money and drags down productivity. Congestion is essentially a tax on productivity. Our three largest cities are significantly more congested than comparable Australian cities. Auckland congestion alone is estimated to cost up to around $2.6 billion. Time of use charging is a common sense tool to encourage people to travel at off-peak times or by other modes. It's about keeping our cities moving. Legislation allows local authorities to partner with NZTA on targeted schemes to ease gridlock, improve reliability and support economic growth. Auckland Council is well advanced in shortlisting scheme design options. Ministry of Transport and NZTA officials are supporting them with implementation planning. They are essentially the first cab off the rank, and we're looking forward to seeing how that work rolls out. I went to New York last year in July, where they've just introduced congestion pricing around Manhattan, and I met with the transportation guys there. Fair to say, it was pretty unpopular when it started, and it's now extremely popular. And the reason for that is travel time reliability is greatly improved. Congestion is better at peak times. Congestion is better. There's less congestion at peak times. The emissions from vehicles have created a greater quality of air quality in Manhattan. It's easier for people to walk around and cycle. Quality of life has risen. And so when it was introduced, it was like 70% opposition. It's now 70% support. I expect the same thing here. I don't have any illusions that it will be a popular thing. But the evidence from overseas is that congestion pricing that's well designed works, and eventually support changes to support as people start to feel the benefits rolling out. There is a unanimous parliamentary consensus on time of use pricing as a tool. The legislation passed Parliament unanimously, and we worked really hard actually through the Select Committee process to make some tweaks and some changes to get everyone on board while still maintaining the kind of integrity of what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm really proud of that, and I hope that consensus holds. It's election year, so you know. Finally, let me talk a bit about road safety. Road deaths have trended down since 2022. In 2024, there were 292 deaths and 2,461 serious injuries on our roads. It's good progress, and it matters. We shouldn't draw simple conclusions from quite complex data. No simple factor explains year-to-year changes. It's still too early to say whether or not we've got a downward trend. What we do know is that the biggest gains in road safety come from focusing on the highest risk behaviours and investing in proven cost-effective interventions. That's what the Road Safety Objectives Framework's designed to do. It's got a clear focus on the main contributors to fatal crashes, including alcohol and drugs. The 24 to 27 period invests $1.335 billion into the Road Policing Investment Program. That supports frontline policing and enforcement activity, particularly during high-risk times. Each year, the program targets 3.3 million passive breath tests and breath screening tests. More than 2 million carried out when the risk is highest. We've also ring-fenced funding for 50,000 roadside oral fluid drug tests each year from the first year of implementation. I thought it might be just worth sharing with you how that's going, because we obviously started at the tail end of last year in Wellington. Police have been gaining valuable operational insight into how the new tool works in practice. Testing's been carried out right across the district, from Wellington Central through to the Hutt, where I'm from, to Wairarapa and Kapiti. And that experience is shaping out how the national rollout will eventually be delivered. So as at the 18th of March, so last week, police have conducted more than 650 roadside drug tests, and there have been 24 positive tests. The positivity rate at the roadside's broadly in line in what the police see for alcohol. It's still too early to draw conclusions about national trends, but they have seen an increase in positive results as testing activity has expanded across Wellington. Officers are reporting favourable feedback from the public during testing. I think people were a little bit worried about another test at the roadside and more people being stopped, but actually the public are pretty on board with it. I think people are pretty aware of the fact that alcohol and drugs are the major killers on our roads. So police are still in the early stages. It's been about three and a half months or so, still collecting data, early stage processes on learning, refining processes and getting ready. But they are getting ready for the national rollout from mid-2026. We're also focusing on improving the safety of our roads. There's some recent AA research which I've seen, which shows that significant investment in improving roads, you see the benefits of reduced deaths and serious injuries, and that's good to see. Vehicles are another important part of the puzzle. The overall safety of our vehicle fleet has continued to improve over time. In 2025 alone, there were nearly 40,000 fewer 1- and 2-star vehicles on our road, which is great. Finally, I thought I'd just give you a bit of information about alcohol interlocks. We're looking closely at what works for repeat high-risk offenders. I'm really aware of the public angst about idiots who repeatedly drink and drive and cause mayhem on our roads. And in my view, a really key underutilised tool here is alcohol interlocks. So I got the Ministry of Transport to go and use what's called the Integrated Data Infrastructure Database. This is this world-leading, actually, really sophisticated research spreadsheet. It was more than a spreadsheet, but that's the easiest way of thinking about it, which tracks a lot of stuff going on in New Zealand. I don't pretend to understand it, but I know that it's powerful. And that data shows, or data from the IDI shows that alcohol interlocks reduce the risk of alcohol-impaired driving. Here's 3 stats that you might be interested in. Drink driving offenders given alcohol interlock orders are 9% less likely to reoffend within 4 years, 45% more likely to remain in employment, and 22% less likely to depend on welfare than comparable drink drivers given driving disqualification orders. Are pretty powerful results. A 10% or 9% reduction in reoffending within 4 years could be higher, but it's a pretty good number. But 45% more likely to remain in employment, I thought was powerful, really powerful. And it just shows that interlocks work. But the uptake of them is lower than it could be, and frankly, lower than it should be. Many eligible offenders are not given alcohol interlock sentences, and many offenders who are ordered to do so by the courts don't go and get them. So Paul Goldsmith and I have started a bit of a research program on this to look at essentially how we can increase the uptake of alcohol interlocks. There's possibly a role for government there around funding. I don't want to get ahead of my good colleague, the Minister of Finance, having just told you all about how things are so tight, but there's possibly a role for government there around funding. But the key is to look at how we can get them used more and get them ordered more and get people actually using them more, because we know that they work. And I think the public are on board with them as well. And it's just totally logical, totally sensible. So we'll have more to say about that in due course. I wouldn't say it's my priority number 1 in transport, but it is something that I'm very interested in, and I think where we can make a real difference. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I think we're taking some questions. Simon? Yes, very good. Thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to your questions. Cheers.
So, we've got a couple of roving mics in the audience. No matter how loud you think your voice is, it gets absorbed in this room. So pop your hand up if you've got a question. I've got an offer of help and a first question.
Sure.
We have done some AA Research Foundation research on interlocks.
Oh, great.
We know what the problem is. It's the gaps between the stages where the offenders fall between getting a licence and getting the interlock. And we'll make sure that we reinforce that with your team at the Ministry.
Great.
Because there's a nice cheap solution there just to make sure people get pushed from one stage to another.
Okay. See, this is the sort of stuff I'm looking at. This is great. Thank you. Look forward to that.
And my question is that late last year, we called for an increase in fines and penalties for traffic offences, which you kindly came out and supported. Yep. Would you care to give us an update on where that work's going? Yes, I can.
The case is overwhelming, obviously. The fine for driving 10k or up to 10k over the speed limit is $30, and that was set in 1988. So it's now, what's that, 38 years, my maths? Yes, 38 years out of date. So we've got work underway around not just that, but the broader suite of road safety penalties, and that work is still progressing. I think I've got a lot on in transport, and the reality is quite a lot of the Ministry of Transport staff have been redeployed to the latest situation that we're dealing with the Middle Eastern conflict. So many staff are now working on various elements of that. So we've got the road safety road rules reform program underway as well. Some of these technical rules around vehicle specs and lane use and kids on bikes and heavy vehicle specifications, some of those rules are 10, 15 years out of date and are really important, actually. So we've got a program underway around that, all of which is taking time as well. So I haven't forgotten about it, but no announcements today.
Okay, brilliant. We've got a question coming from... Oh, there we go.
Chris, just a question that we haven't covered off today. The CCS, where do you see that going moving forward? Because it obviously affects the vehicle fleet being brought into the country and with it being temporarily discounted.
Yeah, so the question's about the clean car standard? Yeah. So it's a complicated, long issue. But you know, we came in and said, look, the clean car standard's too onerous and too high. We want to align with comparable international countries. We did that early 2024 when Simeon was Minister of Transport. That was done in good faith. Then it became really clear towards the back end of last year that even the existing standard wasn't working either, and unless we made some quite urgent changes, we were going to start in 2026 and there's another round of tightening on the standard was going to bite, and there was going to potentially be a flow-on effect of quite steep increases in vehicle prices basically in this year from 2026. And we decided that was not a tolerable situation, and in light of recent events, I suspect many people agree with us. So we made some urgent changes at the back end of last year to essentially stop that from happening. And we also launched a full review of the clean car standard, which includes basically, I mean, there's got a bit of a tension about, are you looking at abolishing the standard? Well, it's more about starting from first principles and saying, okay, what are we trying to achieve here? What is the purpose of a clean car standard? Is it a good idea to have one? And then if it is a good idea to have one, what level do you set it at in a way that makes sense for New Zealand? So we've just gone basically back to the beginning and said, okay, let's start from first principles here and conduct some rigorous public policy, evidence-based research around what we're trying to accomplish. So that's underway right now. I haven't seen the results of that. The officials will be giving me some advice on that soon, and we will make decisions on that. But the clean car standard changes we made at the back end of last year, have essentially kind of reset the system in the short term, and so we're just working our way through that. So I'll have more to say once we've considered the advice and I've taken it through Cabinet.
Geordie.
Morena Minister, thank you for your remarks, really interesting. Transmission Gully.
Yes.
So thank you to the government for moving the speed limit to 110. It's great to be able to drive at the speed that the road has been engineered for. Appreciate that. But Transmission Gully, summer was spent with the remedial work on the surface. Was a pain. And to be fair to the agency, I thought it was well communicated and appeared to be done as efficiently as possible. But, the fact that it was done less than 4 years after Transmission Gully opened, you had Mackay's to Peka. I think there was remedial work done less than a year after that opened. So where's the failure in the system in terms of design, engineering, governance, risk management? Are officials learning the lessons from these things? And I know the causes were different, but nonetheless, it's the same kind of issue keeps happening.
Frustrating, eh? Yep. I hear you. I mean, there's lots of things I could say. I mean, Transmission Gully, it's obviously a great project for Wellington, very popular. The 110's great, but I'm as frustrated as you are around the remedial works. Look, I'm not a traffic, I'm not an engineer. I don't understand the stuff like that. But I've made it really clear to the Transport Agency that my expectations are that we do things properly, we do things cost effectively, and we've got to do things properly the first time and not have to go back and fix everything. So look, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I have, as Minister, I have relatively limited levers as to how I actually accomplish that, because it's all done by the NZTA and then the contractors and the deliverers. All I can do is make my expectations really clear, and I've done that, and I'll continue to do it.
Vince. Minister Bishop, good to see you again.
Oh, Vince.
I won't talk about the 4-laning for Northland, we'll come to that later on. But probably the bigger question for you at the present moment is the extensive demand on diesel for our heavy trucks and our transport. Is there any alternatives for those transports? Are you looking into any alternatives? Because Northland, we do have alternatives.
What are they?
We're actually turning plastics into diesel.
Well, that's good. Encourage you to keep doing that, but I don't think it'll meet the need. At least maybe not in the short term. I mean, look. I mean, the problem is with diesel, right? Is what we call the elasticity of demand is far less than it is for petrol. So, diesel is a non-substitutable, sorry to talk economics, but it's much more of a non-substitutable good than petrol. We just need it. We need it for, take one notable example, buses. So 20% of the bus fleet is electric. Actually, Auckland's just had 33 new electrics arrive, right? Just in the last week or so, which is great. But around the country, on average, the bus fleet's about 20% electric. Nelson is 100% electric. Old Nick's happy about that down there. But about 80% is diesel, and we need our buses to run, particularly at the moment. So that's not a lot we can do about that. Likewise, in rural New Zealand and for freight, diesel was just a non-negotiable necessity. And you'll see in the National Fuel Plan later today, without getting ahead of the announcements, you'll see the reflection that probably the fuel type we're most worried about is diesel, because it's really important. And I don't know about the plastics thing, but it sounds good. Might be more of a medium to long-term proposition. You are starting to see a little bit of heavy vehicles move towards electric, but the technology's not quite there yet. It's not there yet. Very, very low, small uptake so far. That will probably accelerate over time, I would say, but in the next few years, diesel's where it's at for our trucks and for many vehicles. And it's not just about that. It's diesel. It's a major component of construction. With all these roads underway around the country right now, they need diesel to keep the construction going. So trust me, we are acutely aware of it.
Yeah, John Skevington. Just wait for the mic, John. Wait for the mic, because we want everybody to hear what you've got to say. Martin's just coming from your shoulder. There you go.
Thanks, Minister. Just a comment on the interlocks again.
Yeah.
Clearly, initially, there's a real lack of knowledge and understanding in the judicial system. Just in my hometown of Ashburton, I watched the court news, and there's clearly a misunderstanding of what the aims and objectives were. That's probably improved quite a lot, but maybe there's still some work to do there.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's sort of like, I think basically what happened is we started using them and everyone forgot about them. And we probably didn't, it's like a lot of things government does, right? We make big song and dance about announcements, and then, we just sort of assume they're being rolled out properly, and the reality is they just haven't been used as effectively. Government's brilliant at this. We make big song and dance announcements and we never go back and follow up on what's actually happening next. It's classic. So I'm kind of determined not to be that guy. Time will tell whether or not that's actually true. But, I agree with you. So we just got to go back and have a look at how we can increase uptake. So we've got that work underway. And you're probably right around the judiciary. You'll be a bit careful about what I say. I'm not allowed to criticise the judiciary. But we can change some of the sentencing rules, and there's sort of practical implementation guidance as well. I'd be interested to see that research that Simon mentioned.
Chris, you've put together RMA reform, fast-track legislation. You're amalgamating the Ministry for the Environment, the Ministry of Transport, the urban functions of DIA. What does good look like to you at the end of all of this? That's a good question. So there's four major things that I think of as the stools to a chair that I've got underway, which will, if we get it right, fundamentally transform our cities and our regions for the better and lift long-term growth and prosperity for New Zealand. So the first leg of the chair is RMA reform, and it's the most important one. It's fundamental to everything we want to accomplish as a country. It's since 91, since it started, it has stymied housing growth and business growth, renewable energy. We spend $1.3 billion a year on consenting infrastructure alone. That is the cost of Transmission Gully, by the way. That's just on red tape. It's just on consenting. It's made it harder for farmers. It's made it harder for renewable energy, years and years and years to get consent to build a solar farm. So fast track is solving some of that. We've now had 14 projects go through the fast track, they're massively reducing down the consenting time. So the Ports of Auckland that Desley and the Mayor and I cut the ribbon on the other day, that was done in 7 months. They reckon it would have taken 5 years normally. So fast track's part of it, but it's not just about fast track. So comprehensive RMA reform is really, really important. We've got 2 bills before Parliament. We'll have that passed by the end of the year, by the election. That will reset the concept of spatial planning. We'll have standardised zones in our cities. We'll have far less interference by councils and people's private property rights. There'll be far more freedom to do things in this country. But it will also help
spatially plan our cities so we get those infrastructure corridors designated and looked at and planned for properly over time, which again is one of the great failings of the New Zealand system. So RMA reform is kind of one leg. Then local government reform. We thought quite hard about whether or not we do local government reform at the same time as RMA reform. There's an argument to just don't bite off more than you can chew, which is fair enough. But as we sort of thought about it, they're just so complementary and ancillary to each other. And like, we have too many councils in this country. 78 councils is ridiculous. Now here in Auckland, sort of solved that problem to some extent already. Yep, the super city gets a bit of grief, but honestly, would anyone go back? I mean, like North Shore Council, Waitakere, Manukau, seriously, Auckland City. I mean, no one would go back, and there's a reason for that. Is it's just created a far more functional city, and so Auckland's kind of done the heavy lifting there. But like Wellington, where I'm from, for example. I mean, Wellington, Lower Hutt, Upper Hutt, Porirua, Masterton, South Wairarapa, Carterton. Carterton's got its own council and a mayor. Like, it's 8,000 people. Like, when you drive over the Wairarapa Hill, the Rimataka Hill, within about 40 minutes drive, you go through 4 different council areas. Like, it's pretty ridiculous. And there's all those inefficiencies that go from that, and all the duplication. Different rules about building a house in Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt, which is partly about RMA reform, but it's also about local government. Building a house in Wellington's different to Porirua. There's slightly different rules around all of those things. And there's enormous duplication in the system. Like regional councils have their own plans as well. We've got this ongoing issue about whether regional policy statements are superior to district plans or whether or not they're complementary. 30 years of debate around that. It's hopeless. So anyway, local government reform is a bit less advanced than RMA reform. We've put out this kind of proxy idea for how we want to do it. Some people are really up for it, like up Vince's way. Northland's pretty keen on essentially moving to one unitary council for Northland. So we're having a think about that, and there's some other areas that are quite keen to move on. It's like we've ripped the scab off, or ripped the Band-Aid off the scab. Everyone's like, oh, great, finally, people are talking about it, excellent. So we're just kind of giving some thought to that. Other people, want to remain stuck in the status quo and have an argument, forevermore around, the right way of structuring each region and all that sort of stuff. So at some level, central government is like the circuit breaker here. Like, we're just going to have to basically make a decision, and it'll be a bit unpopular with some people, but honestly, I mean, Auckland was a bit the same. There's endless debate, 2008, 9, 10, 11 about Auckland, and then eventually the government said, well, we're doing it, and again, there's still a bit of debate, but would anyone go back? They wouldn't. So my experience is sometimes decisiveness and actually taking an action to cut through some of the noise is the right thing to do. So that's kind of where I'm at. So that's the second part of it, and then the third part of it is we're fundamentally changing the way infrastructure funding and financing works at a local government level for development. So we're creating a flexible planning system. We need a flexible infrastructure funding system to go with that as well. And we're moving away from development contributions, which tend to under-recover the cost of infrastructure at a council level on average, and moving towards development levies, which will empower councils to have more ability to set segmented levy rates based on the cost of infrastructure, and let price signals flow through to where development happens. And so essentially the idea is to let growth pay for growth. So where you've got growth, the growth should cover the costs of the infrastructure required to support that growth, so you don't end up with other ratepayers cross-subsidising that growth. Simple principle, harder to put in place into practice. We've got consultation underway on that right now. I've got a draft bill, and my aim is to get a piece of legislation into the House by the middle of the year and send it to select committee. Hopefully we'll get re-elected and I can come and finish it off in the second term. And then the final leg is MCERT, which is the new ministry, which is basically the way I'm thinking about that is we demand quite a lot in central government from local government. So, and local government rightly gets pretty pissed off about that. We give them all these things they have to do. We, badmouth them all the time, and I'm as guilty of that as anyone. But we have not been a very good partner in the project of nation building. And part of the reason we haven't been a very good partner in that is because we've had ourselves organised in a really dysfunctional, uncoordinated way. I mean, take housing, okay? We have a Ministry of Housing. It's about 300 people. But actually the big levers for housing supply is not so much in housing and urban development. It's in the Environment Ministry, which is the agency that looks after district plans, zoning, National Policy Statement on Urban Development, spatial plans. That's all dealt with by MFE, not by HUD. The infrastructure component of council rules and how councils work out what infrastructure they build and all that sort of stuff, that's all dealt with by the Department of Internal Affairs, not by the Housing and Urban Development Ministry and not by MFE. It's a bit ridiculous when you think about it, and the advice is uncoordinated and disconnected, so we're merging all those things together. Transport, one of the reasons you build transport projects is for housing, and one of the reasons, and housing can't exist without transport, and so that's obviously an intimately connected part of it. There's been two big things driving me around the creation of the ministry. One is being a better partner to local government, so that when local government deals with central government, they deal with, as much as possible, one agency, which will be this new entity. And then the second is making sure that the role of the Crown is much more clearly articulated and coordinated around big developments around the country. The two examples that I'm most worked up about, which some of you have heard me rant about before, one is City Rail Link, where we decided back in 2012-13 to build an underground rail in Auckland. Fantastic. First talked about in the 1930s, the Morningside deviation. Eventually we got on with it. But we viewed it as a transport project only. So we set up a special purpose vehicle, a company, council owns half, we own the other half. We said to them, get on with it. It's taken too long, cost too much money, but they've done that. But actually, why do you build transport projects? It's not just so you can build an underground rail line and go, oh, look at that, isn't that amazing? What a feat of engineering. That's not the reason. The reason you do it is to stimulate growth in housing and business development. And the Auckland CBD is going to be transformed as a result of CRL. But we missed some opportunities along the way. And some of you have heard the Mayor rant on about Mangawhau Station, Mount Eden Station. That will open, and it's a wasteland surrounding Mount Eden. And it's a real missed opportunity. We should have been master planning that, working with developers, looking at the uplift around the area. We should have been doing that like 10 years ago. We haven't done that. And part of the reason is that we've been useless at central government of thinking about these things in a coordinated way. So that will change. We should have been looking at value uplift. We should have been looking at levies to help the beneficiaries of the growth in the Auckland Central Business District, for example, help pay for the project. There's an enormous number of things we can and should have done differently on CRL. And eventually, once it's open, focus at the moment is on getting it open, but we are going to do a lessons learned report as to what went right and what went wrong about it. The other example is Drury. In Drury, we are building an entirely new city, kind of by accident, basically. There's a combination of private plan changes, council. Phil Twyford started building not him, but he ordered the building of new train stations at Drury, Ngakaroa, the electrification of the line to Pukekohe. There's billions of dollars of private sector investment going into Drury. We're building a new town. We're basically building a new city. But no one really decided to build a new city there, and no one really thought about how we would do it. And I am still yet to get a briefing from anyone inside central government about what we are doing at Drury that satisfies me. No one in central government can tell me exactly what we are doing there and what the role of the government is and what the role of the Crown is. No one. 2.5 years in. And I reckon I'll get to the end of the term and I still won't know. This is pretty hopeless. So the government clearly has a role at Drury, okay? We're building some train stations. We're all funding those. There's land supply issues. There's infrastructure funding and financing issues. There's the spatial planning coordination. Where are we going to build the new hospitals? Where are we going to build the new schools? Where are we segmenting land for that? Where are we thinking about where that's going to go? How are we going to sequence that properly? How are we going to get urban development in the town centre that's being built at Drury? There's clearly a role for central government there, but we just haven't thought about that properly. And one of the reasons, again, is that because there's multiple different agencies responsible for it, no one is responsible for it. You know what it's like? Once you put a committee in charge of something, unless there's actually someone driving things properly as chair of the committee and as a czar saying, I'm the one accountable and I will do it, you know what it's like? Nothing happens. It's like school projects, like kids in charge of it, so nothing happens. I mean, committees in government work like that too. It's hopeless. So you need someone in charge, and at the moment we don't have anyone in charge. So MCERT is an attempt to change all that. So anyway, it's a long answer, sorry, but
well,
you've got me going on my passion topic. But
I did ask.
30 seconds. If we get RMA reform right, we sort out local government, and we get the infrastructure system right, and we get the role of the Crown properly conceptualised around all that stuff, the 2030s can be New Zealand's decade. We can be one of the wealthiest countries on the planet if we get our planning system properly done and we get spatial planning done effectively and we slim down the size of local government, we can let people get on and build things more, we can plan and build our cities properly, we can have urban development in our city core, big hubs of productivity and growth, we can support our farmers and growers to export to the rest of the world. The 2030s can be New Zealand's decade, but we have to make the changes now, and I'm really kind of conscious that a lot of the stuff we're doing in government, and this is frustrating because it's difficult to explain to the public, but a lot of the stuff we're doing in government now is about the 2030s. It's not about the next 3 years, which is difficult for politicians because we work on, get through the next election cycle. But the RMA reforms will be fully into effect by 2029. Local government funding and financing reform will be into effect by the end of 29. Local government reform will probably take another 2 to 3 years. MCERT will take time to get underway. If you think about the work Erica's doing in education, there's some short-term wins around reading, writing and maths and all that sort of stuff, but what we're actually trying to do there is set New Zealand kids up for success in the 2030s. The long-run effects of the education reforms we've got underway will be the kids who are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 now, who get to secondary school in the 2030s, who can actually turn up to secondary school knowing how to read and write, with an actual understanding of knowledge in the curriculum. Because we're reversing 30 years of experimentation on our children through a failing education system. The work Chris Pink's got underway around building liability reform, around building materials competition, around exempting Auckland from the earthquake-prone building legislation. All of the stuff this government's doing is actually about the long-term success for New Zealand in the 2030s and beyond. And we've just got to be able to articulate that to the public, that we are taking tough decisions that successive governments have not dealt with and have just basically said, yeah, we'll deal with that later, And that's what's led us into the mess we're in as a country. So anyway, that's the mission of the next 6 months.
Thank you very much, Minister Chris Bishop. Such passion, nobody's going to leave the room not knowing what Chris thinks.